I'm Aimee Quickfall. I'm the head of the School of Education here at Leeds Trinity University. So it's nice to be talking to you about something that I'm really passionate about, and I'm really pleased to be here. There'll be people in the room who will have heard the word philosophy, philosophical inquiry, and think, this is really not for me. I'm going to go and check my emails. This is about you. And I think this is my mission today, is to try and convince you that there might be something in this, and it might be worth having a look at, and it might be something that as Lee was talking about, that sort of finding your motivation to stay in teaching. This is what did it for me, actually. And this is how I stayed in the classroom for 12 years. I think without this, I might have drifted away quite a lot earlier. This captured me, and it made education mean something to me. Works. So first of all, if you're sitting there now thinking, I don't really know what philosophy means, I don't know what that is, I don't know what it looks like, you're really not alone, because actually philosophers really struggle to say what it is that they do. Historically, there's a lot of dressing gown wearing, which I think harks back to probably toga wearing, and there's a lot of drinking tea, a lot of misery, sometimes living in sheds in Norway, that goes on. But it's really hard to define what philosophy is. So don't worry if there isn't a definition sitting in your head already. That's probably normal. When I told my dad I was going to do a philosophy degree, he said, won't that be really expensive with all the cameras that you've got to buy? So you might have drawn probably a man. Yeah. Possibly with a beard. Maybe with a toga. Or looking quite serious. Maybe with glasses. Is that sounding kind of familiar? Yeah, and you're not wrong at all. And I've done this with children, I've done this with teachers, I've done this with students lots and lots of times. And usually there's a quite a big group of white men with glasses and beards. Here they are. Here's a selection of some philosophers. So you're not wrong. That's usually what a philosopher would look like historically. And these are the philosophers that I studied at university. You might have studied at university. And so there's an idea, I think there's probably an idea that philosophers, you have to be upper class, white, male, have a lot of time on your hands, and possibly not massive career aspirations, because there's not really a route for philosophy in terms of careers unless you live in France. So that's our idea generally as a society of what a proper philosopher looks like. Actually, this is what proper philosophers look like. These are two of my philosophy club that I did with early years foundation stage and key stage 1 children. And after a while, they didn't have a huge sense of what a philosopher would look like. But when we talked about it and we had our group and we had our club, after a few weeks, just like you, when I said, can you draw a philosopher? They drew themselves because they knew that they were philosophers. And all that really entails, and this is my definition, and definitions really vary on this because philosophers can't agree what philosophy is, but it's about thinking about really difficult questions that you can't just Google and get an answer to. And it's about working together to come up with ideas that you can share and that you can discuss, and that sometimes you can disagree with, and actually you learn how to disagree and you learn how to still be friends when you've got a big disagreement over one of these huge questions. And that, for me, that's what philosophy is, and that's what my experience of philosophy with children is. And very often children, they early on, they know how to do that. And then we kind of teach them out of it. So we teach them that, no, actually there's this list of facts called the curriculum that you have to know, and there is no alternative view. And you just need to remember those things and then produce them in the test. And there is no debate, so we don't have time for debate. And you can't have a different view about what that means or what happened then or how people felt about something. So it's about bringing that back in. And actually, I'll tell you a little bit about my experiences later, but I found that with really young children, they pick this up really quickly, and they're happy to run with it because I'm generalising, but they tend to be quite opinionated anyway. It's as they get a little bit older that they're trying to work out what's in your head when you ask them a question. They just want to replicate what's in your brain to get it right. So this is about breaking that idea. So Very generally, there are some questions that have easy answers. This is how I explain it to children. This is how I explained it to my early years and Key Stage 1 philosophy club. This is how I explained it to their parents. There are some questions that are really easy to answer. Okay, so you'll have answers to those pretty much straight away, in seconds. Do you like Brussels sprouts? Who likes Brussels sprouts? Yeah. Oh, wow. That's not very many people. Who likes milkshakes? Yeah. We love milkshakes. There's not a massive debate there. You might have a bit of a discussion about, well, you're wrong because milkshakes are awful, but there's not a huge scope for debate. And this is part of philosophical inquiries, finding the best questions. So there are some questions that have loads of answers. So will there ever be robot teachers? There are loads of different answers you could give to that. There are loads of different reasons you could give why there might be, why there might not be, whether it'd be good, whether it'd be morally correct, what would happen to us all. Could there be plants and animals on other planets? Children will have all sorts of ideas, just like we do, about the possibilities there, what it might look like, whether we'll ever know, will we ever answer that question? So the questions with lots of answers. And then there are some really big questions that actually, there are lots of right answers. We don't know the answer. We can't solve it. That we have to sit with it. So things like, what happens to us after we die? Is there a God? What is the right thing to do? Is it ever right to steal, for example? So those questions that actually we'll never really have an answer to that. We'll have a temporary solution that we live with. And we have laws and we have societal norms that help us to answer that. But actually, over time, that could change. And there isn't an answer sitting out there like there is with so much of the national curriculum. So it's about that debate and that discussion and, oh, that's interesting. And, oh, I've never thought about it that way. It's all of those things. So why is she banging on about this? Back in 2015, which is a long time ago now, isn't it? I was classroom teacher. I was at the time teaching year 5 and 6. They loved philosophy. I've been doing philosophical inquiry for quite a while, just on my own, just chipping away, sort of dodging my head teacher who didn't really get it and wasn't fully on board with it, but just, let her get on with it because otherwise she'll never be quiet. Running philosophy clubs at lunchtime, that kind of thing. I was so passionate about it. I really felt like it was making a difference. And then this huge study came out, which is why I still reference it because it was massive, that said philosophy sessions do all the things that Amy thinks it does. Which I thought, this is it now. I'm going to be on world tours talking about philosophy with children. This is it. This is my moment. This is my time to shine. You can guess what happened. But what they found, so big study, 3,000 9 and 10-year-olds, so the age that I was teaching as well, so exciting. 48 schools, massive study, had 1 hour of philosophy a week, and they found that over the year, and this I think threw some people, but their ability in reading and maths and writing improved over that year. Even though in a philosophy session you don't really do a lot of reading. You might read a sentence. You don't do any maths generally, and you don't really do a lot of writing. You might note down a couple of words. So how was that happening? How was this session, which a lot of people might look at as a waste of an hour out of your timetable, how was it doing this? And they found that particularly, and this was really exciting for me because I was working in a school where there was massive disadvantage. The disadvantaged pupils, which they defined as free school meals children, saw a huge increase in their outcomes in testing. So their reading skills improved by 4 months in a year, so an extra 4 months on top of that year of teaching. Their maths by 3 months and their writing by 2 months. This is by doing no reading, maths or writing. Amazing, right? So teachers also reported, and this is a separate paper, but also reported that pupils' confidence had gone up. They were more patient with each other, and I've seen this in group after group that I've worked with. Their self-esteem improved, as well as their raw test results. So you can see why I was excited, right? And there's loads of research out there that backs this up. So this is not just one study that's shown this. Topping and Tricky found that there's a lasting impact. So if you do philosophical inquiry sessions 2 years later, when those children were in secondary school, they could still see a difference between the children that had done that and the children that hadn't. So it's not a short-term thing that you then lose as soon as you stop. I'm sure the philosophy graduates in the room will agree. Philosophy has changed their lives, changed the way you think about things. And yeah, there's lots there. I've got references at the end if you're interested to look at this. But the idea that giving children a bit of time, maybe just an hour a week, even if it's a club at lunchtime, letting them exchange their ideas, having differences of opinion, justifying their reasoning to each other verbally, constructing new ways of thinking about things between them, potentially the most powerful means by which meaningful new learning can take place in classrooms. Right, so I was ready to write my resignation because I'm going to do this now for all the schools in the country. Well, it didn't happen, right? So has anyone in here seen a philosophical inquiry lesson going on in a school? One, 2 people, 3 people, 3 people. And that's standard. That's not your failing. Every time I present this to a group, there's 1 or 2 or 3 people who've seen this. And given the research that you've just seen, the data you've just seen, you would think this would be going on everywhere, wouldn't you? Why wouldn't you? It's cheap. You don't need resources. You just need an hour a week. It makes all this difference. 4 months extra learning in reading. What's not to love? Why wouldn't you be doing it? Can anyone think of a reason why it might not have taken off and scuppered my career? There's no wrong answers again. It's not in the national curriculum. Excellent. Exactly. Where is this magical hour that we're going to do this in? Exactly. Anything else? Yeah.
Lack of knowledge. Teachers teaching.
Exactly. It's a little bit scary to try this if you haven't done it before and you haven't been trained. It's a bit of an unknown. Yeah. Did you have something?
I was going to say.
Yeah, definitely. And I think there is that idea, as we were saying when we were drawing our philosophers, this idea that's not me. I can't do that. I need a dressing gown and I need to be from an upper class family to do that. Yeah, and there is definitely a training issue there as well. Well done. You've picked out loads of the things that I thought you might say. So people often tell me, especially head teachers, Ofsted, they won't like this. If Ofsted come in and they see this happening, they're going to be asking all sorts of questions about why you're using that hour. In that way, there's no teaching going on in this session. Teachers not really doing, you do loads in a philosophy session, but it doesn't look like teaching. Training, yes, as you said, and whether that's going to be expensive to do, the time, when are we going to fit it in? Because the curriculum's so crammed. And as many times as I've said, but look at the extra learning that you get just from doing that. Isn't it worth making some time in your timetable for that? But we've got all of these things to cover. How can we do it? There's sometimes worries about how disruptive it would be, especially when in a longer session, I would walk you through how to do a session, and I'm very happy to talk through that with anybody who's interested. But it can look like, oh my goodness, that sounds really disruptive. No one's in charge. The children are just all having this discussion. Where's my part in this? How do I control it? What if they say something inappropriate? What's going to happen? It's a different way of being an adult in the classroom. So in a philosophical inquiry, everybody is equal. So it takes quite a while. It takes a few sessions before they stop looking to you for the answer, because whatever they're discussing, even if it's something like, is it ever okay to steal? They expect you to know, because they think you're not just the expert on every single subject. They also think that you're morally perfect, and that you will provide them with a solid answer to that. And actually, as you start to unpick that and that falls apart, it can be quite scary, because it's challenging your role as a teacher. In that, yes, you're a teacher and you know loads of stuff, But also, there are lots of things that you don't know, and that can be quite scary for you and the children. It may not fit in with the ethos of the school. So some schools I've worked at, they've really not sure about this. What if subjects come up? What if the children decide to talk about something that doesn't fit with our ethos? Our parents are going to be upset about. And there's an absolutely infuriating argument that children are too young to be philosophers. And you might recognise some of this from some of the core content framework, maybe. But there is an assumption that to be a philosopher, and there's an assumption that to be creative, maybe, and philosophy is being creative with your thinking, that you have to have an accumulation of knowledge. So you have to either be an adult or you have to be extremely gifted and know a lot of stuff. So you have to know all the curriculum first, and then we can talk about it. Or you have to know all of the curriculum first, and then you can have a go at making something or creating something of your own. And there's a bit of an intellectual snobbery, especially around philosophy, that there is a level you have to reach before you can do this. And things are often pointed out, like until you can think without using toys or manipulatives or apparatus, you're not a philosopher. You're not really thinking. It has to all happen up here. But actually, what's wrong with using apparatus? All the Silicon Valley tech bros who are creating all the amazing things, they're using apparatus, they're using toys, they're playing and making billions of dollars. So what's wrong with that? There is a bit of a snobbery about it has to all happen up here. So the big argument that I've come up against again and again, and I did this on my philosophy degree. Did you do Ship of Theseus? Yeah. So this idea that you need to have all the background first, you need to have a massive amount of knowledge before you can start talking about it or thinking about it. And the example often given is the Ship of Theseus, so I'll be very brief. But the paradox of the Ship of Theseus is, this is Theseus's ship. Over a number of years, the parts of the ship are replaced. So the mast goes and is replaced, the sail goes and is replaced, every plank of wood is replaced. And so it's made up of all new parts. And the old parts of the Ship of Theseus that have been replaced get constructed into another ship. And the paradox is, which one is the Ship of Theseus? So it's about identity. And you can apply it to humans because our cells regenerate, and then we have a new body every 7 years or whatever it is. Lee will correct me. So where is the original you? Where does the identity lie? How is it continuous? So the argument is, Morris's argument is that young children couldn't engage in this because they don't have an understanding of what a mast is or a sail, or how something could be constructed and reconstructed or recycled to create those two ships. And so until they know all of those things, until they know about those processes and that information, they can't think about identity, because they'll just get bogged down and stuck with, but how would you do that? Or how would you take a ship apart? Well, this is where I think children are extremely good if you tailor it to them. So this is my little boy. This is quite a few years ago. And the perfect counterexample, I think, to the Ship of Theseus is Lego, right? So really young children absolutely get this, that you can build a house out of Lego and then someone else will come along, sometimes without your permission, and they will take your house apart and they will make it into a zoo, right? So they completely understand that zoo you've made there, that's my house. They completely get that argument of identity. So I'll tell you a little bit about how a philosophical inquiry session starts, and then I'm going to tell you about some of my experiences. So this is Whistle Stop. If anybody's interested in how to do this and you're thinking, I'd love to have a go, come and see me. Alison will tell you, anybody sends me an email about philosophy with children, you get a reply within 2 seconds, because it's absolutely my passion, and I'll be in your face about it, and you'll have to tell me to back off. But you start with a session stimulus. I love this one. I always use this photo with groups. And you do something, and you can do this on its own. You don't have to do a full session, but just ask the children one word to describe what this means to you. What might that mean? What's going on? what's happening. Think of one word, summarise it, which is a really good skill, and then talk about it. So encouraging them to talk. So tell your partner, why did you choose that word? What is that word doing for you with this picture? And obviously they laugh, first of all, and that's all fine. So I'll tell you about some of my experiences, and I'll come back to the sumo wrestler. So I've done lots of philosophical inquiry in primary, and this is just to counter the narrative that it won't fit in with the curriculum and Ofsted don't like it. So on an Ofsted inspection I had in a Lincolnshire school, the Ofsted inspector came in and we did this book. So the stimulus was a book. So it was a literacy lesson. We were talking about the language. We were talking about what was happening in the story. Bringing this back to Lee's outrageous claim that dogs are bad for the environment. This is about a dog that dies. This book makes me cry every single time I read it, and I did cry in the Ofsted inspection lesson, and the Ofsted inspector cried, and he went and got me a tissue. And honestly, my record with Ofsted is not great, but he said to me after the session, that was so brilliant. And it wasn't me, it was what the children were doing. They led the session. So that was so amazing. The learning that was going on in that room. I could see and this is what you want to hear from Ofsted, I could see the children making progress with their thinking through that lesson. Like, thank you. Because I barely said a word. I was just crying. So you can fit it into the curriculum. You can use it in any lesson. You can use this in any lesson. You just change the stimulus. And Ofsted potentially like it. This is the one that makes me cry. Staff might have heard me crying about this before. Not real name, Connor. I change his name every time. But this was a philosophy club that I was doing every week with upper key stage 2 children. And Connor was that sort of child that he wasn't top of the class. He was kind of, bumbling along. He's doing okay. Not really, wasn't a star of the sports field, which was a big thing at the school. He was okay, but he was one of those children that you could go all day and then think, I don't know if I've spoken to Connor today. Those children that you just think, oh, they slip under my radar. I need to do something about that. And he was really quiet, and the other children kind of, yeah, Connor's all right. He wasn't being bullied or anything like that, but he certainly wasn't. He was part of the furniture, to put it in a horrible way. We'd done philosophy for quite a while. Connor was always quiet in the sessions, more of a listener, which is fine. And then one day we were talking about the sumo wrestler picture. And the question the children came up with, because they generate the question and then they debate it, was if you know something's going to hurt, like squaring up to a massive sumo wrestler, should you do it? Because actually, if you know it's going to hurt, it's going to damage you, and it's going to upset people who care about you. So should you actually, if it's going to hurt, say, morally, I shouldn't be doing that. So they were quite high level. It's a brilliant question. I was like, yes, when they came up with it. And they were batting it around, and they were talking about, well, no, maybe you shouldn't, because, actually you should look after yourself. And if you know it's going to hurt, not think it's going to hurt. And they were talking. And Connor sort of gestured that he wanted to say something. I'm going to try not to cry, because this is many years ago and it still makes me cry. Connor said, and all the children were sort of like, oh, Connor's got something to say. And he said, my grandma is in hospital and she's dying. And it hurts me every time I see her. And when I get in the car to go and see my grandma, I know it's going to hurt when I see her, because I haven't got very much time left with her. But I would never miss that, because just getting to see her is worth the pain. And you can imagine the class was just like, oh my goodness, Connor. And the hairs stand up on the back of my neck now, even just talking. And it's years later. Connor will be, I don't know, in his mid-20s now. He could be in here. And it didn't change Connor's life. He wasn't paraded around the playground on the shoulders of his new mates. But children started to look at him in a different way. And over the weeks, his confidence grew because he'd said something that was meaningful, and children saw him in a different way because he'd had that opportunity to share those feelings, very human feelings that lots of the other children could relate to. And suddenly they saw him, and I saw him like, right, now I know you a little bit better. And I love that story. And then I've also done, as I said, I've done philosophy club with little ones, with 5, 6, 7-year-olds, and they are brilliant at this because they don't care what you think, by and large. They've got their own ideas, and they don't care what philosophers in the past have said either. They're like, no, I don't think that's true. So we talked about the ship of Theseus because I've kind of got a bee in my bonnet about this, and actually they completely got it. They completely understood without knowing anything about shipbuilding that yes, you can take parts of something and it can change. And we talked about how they can have their hair cut, or they can have a scab on their knee, or they can need glasses. And actually, they are the same person, but they're different, and their identity changes over time. And it's fascinating. It's such a privilege to work with them. And we use lots of Lego. They did very little writing, reading, or maths, but we all felt that they got a lot out of it. We called it the Bluebird rather than the Ship of Theseus, just because that's the name that they wanted to use. And I've written about this as well, just in terms of acknowledging that young children can do this. Young children are brilliant thinkers, and we mustn't shut them down. So why haven't we taught and observed philosophy for children in schools? Well, you've given me some brilliant reasons. I think there are so many reasons to have a go at this, and it can be scary and it can be daunting. And sometimes the first time you have a go at it, you think that's a disaster. I'm never doing that again, because they didn't listen to each other and somebody got upset and it was a real faff and I could have been doing maths. But if you stick with it, I can give you a really simple plan for how to run a session, and it works. It really does work. And the research is there, but I've seen it. I've seen it happen in the room. So if anyone's interested and wants to know more and wants to have a go at this, or you just want to come back to me and say, actually, I don't believe that, Amy, or actually, I think there's an issue with that, or there's something you haven't thought about, please get in touch. And I promise, this is my philosophical promise to you, I promise I will support you with this if you want to have a go. And then you can become an advocate for it as well. And you can come and stand here next year and say how brilliantly it's going with your class, because I would love that. I would love to hear that. So please do get in touch if you want to have a go, or if you just want to have a chat about it, let me know. There's some references for you there that'll be on the slides, and there's some links as well to loads of brilliant resources that are free if you want to engage with that and have a look. And yeah, good luck and thank you for listening.